Stop asking for permission. But we don't just start doing this. We need to dig into our life and unearth our unique purpose and contribution in the world. And once we do, once we're sold out in belief, there is no amount of criticism or judgment that will hold us back. Welcome to The Conscious Investor. Let's get started. Welcome back, Conscious Investor. Wow. Do you feel like you have to ask permission for everything in life? We're going to dive into that. But before we do, as always, I love to check ratings and reviews once a week. I love to look at, what kind of feedback is out there and how have I served you and supported you? And maybe there's some feedback that I need to be aware of so that I can do a better job of that. So I just want to give a huge shout out to Conscious Investor Michelle Shriver. Thank you so much. She left a 5-star review, which, wow, that just makes my heart happy that I served powerfully. And she wrote out a review. She says, mindset plus creating a life of personal freedom. I love the Conscious Investor podcast. It's on my weekly playlist, starting with Mindset Mondays. Julie's blend of motivation and insight on life, coupled with sound and practical tips for creating not just financial freedom, but personal freedom through passive investing, is inspirational in my own life. Thank you, Julie, for sharing your wisdom with the world. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for taking time to just let me know that I am serving and supporting you in a powerful way. And Conscious Investor, I appreciate every one of you who has left. We have 173 ratings and reviews, and you are just melting my heart and putting wind in my sails. And it just lets me know that you are listening. And this is also supporting other people in finding the podcast, which is really powerful. Let's dive into this whole concept of permission. Remember, and I am doing this little remember each week just because I do want you to remember that we're doing just a short series on these Monday Mindset episodes. I was just completely inspired by Brendon Burchard's book, The Motivation Manifesto. I believe everyone needs to be reading this book, have a hard copy of the book. It's one that you need to sit with. My husband tried to listen to the audio version and he said, whoa. And I think my oldest brother as well. And they're like, oh, this is definitely something to sit and read with. You'll read a couple of pages and probably need to just take a little pause. But with that said, he begins the book speaking on 3 sections: freedom, fear, and motivation. And then he leads into 9 declarations. And Conscious Investor, I know you live a very productive life, a life of contribution, and you're not always able to read everything that I'm reading. I want to support you in having access to some of the key points that stood out to me from this book to support you in your own life. So this is the 4th declaration, which means there are going to be 5 more episodes to come to wrap up each of the declarations. And this declaration 4 says, we shall advance with abandon. And from that, there's so much in there that I could go into, but I really wanted to drill down into this concept that I'm calling permission not required. So much of our world is focused on permission. Do you have a permit? Do you have permission for, to park that in your driveway? Do you have a permit, which is permission? You are permitted to do something that is permission, right? Do you have your fishing permit? Do you have we have so many permits, which are permissions for us, even as adults. Even there are books about this. Recently, I started listening to Seth Godin's book, which is called, it's an older book. And actually some of the examples are actually super outdated, still relevant, but I'm like, whoa, this is an old work of art here. Permission-based marketing. There's that word permission. And several years ago, Brené Brown, her TED Talk on shame, she shares in this TED Talk how she would write herself a note, giving herself permission to do something. I give myself permission to, feel this feeling. Okay. By the way, it is absolutely fantastic. I will throw this asterisk in there. If you are struggling with something, if you're struggling, I'm trying to think of some examples because I borrowed Brené Brown's concept of writing yourself a note of permission. I borrowed that concept in my own life at some point several years ago, just because sometimes we just need to give ourselves permission. And that's because of the hard wiring that we've had. We're going to get into that, but I want to ask you this real fast. Have you ever asked your spouse for permission, right? Hey, would it be okay if I spent this much money on X, Y, or Z? Okay. We might not use that word permission, but that's what we're asking for. Okay. Maybe you want to head out golfing or you want to grab brunch with friends. You're kind of getting this permission to do that. And this concept of permission, it is embedded into us extremely early on in our life. Think about this. Growing up, we always had to ask permission. So we had to ask all the adults in our lives for permission to do different things. Once we entered the school system, it's especially relevant, right? Okay, you have to have permission to use the restroom. Recently, my son had a little tummy bug. That's putting it nicely, right? And he was concerned. He's like, I don't know that they have I'm going to get in trouble. I might need to use a restroom more than I'm allowed to. Can you imagine? I actually let him stay home that day, and I'm glad I did. It actually was a very good choice, especially when you think about you have to have permission to use the restroom. So it's indoctrinated into us. That's a severe word. I get it, but it is just completely indoctrinated into us from the moment we are young children, right? We ask our parents permissions, probably, may I have a snack? May I have a friend over? May I? And it's always having to get that clearance from the adult, from the parent, from the teacher, from, any type of adult. I'm thinking of did you see that pause? It was so many adults in your life when you're a child that you're trying to get permission from. It can be really overwhelming, but the message is very clear. You must have permission. That's why this is titled Permission Not Required. As teens, that permission turns into more of a peer permission, right? Well, I want the permission to be cool from my peers. So, the teens ended up dressing a certain way, walking a certain way, talking a certain way. And then as adults, as I mentioned, we look to the government for permission for different things. We also look to our bosses for permission to take vacation days. Sometimes you even need permission to take a sick day. You have probably experienced this at some point. Well, we don't have enough people, in your early career or when you were, flipping burgers, proverbially speaking, you might have tried to call in. They're like, we don't have anybody to cover your shift. You got to come in, right? So we're looking for this permission. And the world will tell you, you have to have permission to follow its norms and traditions alone. Yeah, the world is always telling us, no, here's the box you got to fit into. If you don't fit into this, you don't have permission. You may not advance forward. We are conditioned to ask for permission to actually live. Isn't that insane when you really think about it? Permission to live the life that you want to live. You may not have had permission to pursue the career that you wanted to pursue. You may have felt well, I have to become a doctor. I have to become an attorney. I have to become XYZ because that's the expectations of my family and I have to live up to that. So you haven't even had that permission to explore, who am I? What do I have to offer? And unfortunately, Most of this need and this drive for permission, it bleeds into the deeper parts of our lives at the cost of our greater contribution, of our hopes, and of our dreams. So just like a child is afraid to ask permission to use the bathroom, we get flooded with fears that we're going to be criticized, or even worse, that we're going to be abandoned and absolutely left alone. So, do you want to change the course of history and your life? I know you do, Conscious Investor. That's why you listen to the podcast, because we're on a mission. We want to contribute in profound ways. Here it is. Stop asking for permission. Start living your life. Yeah. Stop asking for permission. But we don't just start doing this. We need to dig into our life and unearth our unique purpose and contribution in the world. And once we do, once we're sold out in belief, there is no amount of criticism or judgment that will hold us back. I have found when I first launched this podcast, when I first began investing in multifamily syndications, and when I first started coaching clients, I felt like I needed to ask these different levels of permission. And as I've gained, experience and put in the reps, done the, hung with it, now it's like, I don't need somebody's permission. Like, I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm about. And Conscious Investor, I'm like, I know I'm a conscious investor and this is what I'm all about. And this is how it's going to go down. I'm not asking. In fact, I made a very large pivot in a part of my coaching practice recently. And in that pivot, I just remember realizing like what matters most is this direction that I'm headed, and I know that's the right direction. And I'm not asking people for permission to go that direction because I know that's the direction. And our internal compass lets us know that. And when we are clear and aligned with it and we can see it, we feel very confident about like, no, I don't need their permission to do this. So through this process of this treasure hunt for our greater contribution, our purpose, right? We develop an internal strength to receive helpful feedback and the criticism and like the snarky comments and such, the people that the naysayers, as I always call them, we just learn to discard that. It's like a magnet, right? A magnet attracts, and when it attracts to it and it's the right side, a plus and a minus, it's like clink. And it sticks together. But if you try to put the wrong sides of the magnet, two plus sides together or something, it's like going to like repel each other. Okay. And so we learned, okay, I can attract, I can receive these good things and I can repel the rest. And just understand that breaking free from the pack mentality, our uniqueness will end up leading the pack, and it awakens others to the possibilities their lives hold. Unfortunately, guess what? Most people won't want the responsibility to live the life they were entrusted to live. So you're going to face some resistance or some friction, and just be wide-eyed about that. If you follow me on social media, I'd love it if you do at The Conscious Investor on Instagram. And you can follow me, Happy Julie Holly, I think, on Facebook. But I'm reading a book by Robert Greene, and it is called Mastery. And in this, he describes how people create a false sense of control because they don't believe they can make a difference in the world. And in doing so, they end up living this like very shell of a life. And so that goes into that. A lot of people just don't want the responsibility of living the life they were entrusted. And so they just fabricate this other reality, this other world. I can assure you of this. Living into your purpose takes you to the most extraordinary places. Every bit of knowing who we are, where we're headed, and not in a fixed way, but because new information requires reassessment, the clarity of purpose in life outweighs the permission we're conditioned to crave. Let me say that again. The clarity of purpose in life outweighs the permission we're conditioned to crave. So when you know what you are about, you are going to be like, I don't need permission. I know what I'm about. I can advance with abandon. So yeah. Okay. Listen, the reality is I love acceptance. You know that. You know, I'm always like, oh my gosh, I love your ratings and reviews. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because you know what? We're human. I'm human. And we love positive feedback and we love receiving that. And so, yeah, we all want a level of acceptance in our life, but we must always ask. And here is a key question. Will we choose other people's opinions, preferences, and approval over our true heart's desire and growth? That is a huge red flag. As soon as we notice, like, we're looking for this approval and preference and their opinion to be high of us, if we're looking for that and we are neglecting our heart's desires and growth that we feel called and aligned with, that's the red flag. So for me personally, I always do what I call a vertical check-in, right? And so, you know, you've been listening, you know, I'm a person of faith. I understand not everyone shares my faith, but I am very comfortable with where I'm at. And I like to check and ensure that my heart and intentions are aligned with God. And for me, that's like green light. You know, am I aligned vertically? Awesome. Is this cool, like good with my husband and with my family? Am I showing the care and being responsible here? Awesome. Let's go. Game on. Okay. So what about you? Are you living a life for you or a life conditioned on permission from others? What would it look like if you understood your purpose and called the shots? These are really critical questions for you to ask, conscious investor, because most people are wrapped up in fear and discomfort and they don't want to break away from the pack. Because guess what? It is uncomfortable. I've done it and I've lived that for so many years of my life most of my life. I can't remember a time where I wasn't. And so all that to say is that when you are willing to break away from the pack, you get to see a greater part of yourself, a greater part of why you're created and the contribution that you have to offer the world. So I want to encourage you, again, the two questions you want to ask. Am I living a life for me, or am I living a life that is conditioned on permission for others? And what would it look like if I understood my purpose and I called the shots? Just go down that path, explore it, see where you land. If you need support with that, I don't know when this goes live. I might not have a coaching spot left. I've got like literally, I only take 10 coaching clients at a time, you guys. I really want to be able to be present, serve, support, and all of that. And so all that to say, I may have a spot open. So if you're interested in the coaching and exploring your greater purpose and unearthing that and breaking free from this need for tripping over my words, permission, please, like, there's a link down in the show notes where you can schedule just a 20-minute, like, let's just see, you know, what's going on and see if there is a fit here where I can support you. You're awesome, conscious investor. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the fact that you are willing to think outside the box and that you want to find that greater contribution instead of continually asking for permission to live the life that you are entrusted to live. Until next time, live big, love bigger, and do great things. Are you enjoying this episode? Do the world a favor and help trip the algorithm by leaving a review so that this content reaches many others.